Hello everyone and welcome to the Spark and Python with VirtualBox installation lecture. This lecture will walk through how to download and set up VirtualBox with Ubuntu. Then we will walk through installing Spark and Python as well as the Jupyter Notebook system on this VirtualBox Ubuntu. The resources for this lecture has a link to a written form of these instructions that you can reference in case you want to just copy and paste anything we do here. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is actually download VirtualBox and Ubuntu. Let's hop over to the browser and show you how you can find these. Okay, the first thing you need to download is VirtualBox. VirtualBox is basically going to allow you to have a virtual computer on your own physical computer. And this virtual computer is where we're going to be downloading Ubuntu to. If you're running already on an Ubuntu or Linux system, you can basically just skip ahead until we actually start downloading Spark and Python on this VirtualBox. But for Windows users and Mac users, let's show you how you can get a VirtualBox. First, you just come over here to Downloads, and this will take you to the Downloads page, and we're just at virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads, or you can just Google VirtualBox download, and then you'll see these download options. So there's options for Windows hosts and OS X hosts, as well as Linux distributions, but if you're on Linux, you can just do it on your actual system, not on a VirtualBox. And then just click on Windows host if you're on Windows, and it will download an executable file. I already have it, so I'm going to cancel this. And if you're on OS X, you can click on that, and this will download a DMG file. So either way, once that's done downloading, and I cancel that one as well, you just double click it, follow the instructions, do everything with the defaults, and have VirtualBox set up on your computer. Then once you have downloaded VirtualBox and gone through the installation process, again, it's really simple, it's just executable file or DMG. You essentially just double click it and follow the instructions it tells you to do with everything as the default. You need to download Ubuntu once you've done that. So you've downloaded VirtualBox, you've run through the basic installation process, and then you come over here to ubuntu.com. That's going to be the Linux version that we're going to be using, and you go ahead and download Ubuntu. So just come up here, you'll see Downloads, click on that, and there's a couple ways to download it. We're going to be using Ubuntu Desktop. There's Server, Cloud, etc., but click here on Ubuntu Desktop, and this is the one we're going to download. This version is 16.04.2. Really doesn't matter what version you use as long as it's relatively recent. And you can just click here on download, and it's eventually going to download. It'll ask you if you want to help shape the future of some donations. Totally up to you. I'll just kind of put everything to 0 right now to walk through the process. And then eventually you can just say download Ubuntu Desktop. You'll click on it, and it will download the ISO for you. All right, so this is what it should look like. It's going to be an ISO file. And it's quite a large download. It's about 1.4 gigabytes, which kind of makes sense. It's an entire operating system. So this will take some time. I already downloaded in Ubuntu flavor, so I'm going to cancel this. And then I'm going to hop over to VirtualBox. So once you've downloaded and installed VirtualBox, then you have Ubuntu, this ISO file, ISO, extension ready to go, you're going to run VirtualBox, either on your Mac or on your Windows computer. So I already have VirtualBox installed. I'm going to go ahead and grab it. So I will type VirtualBox, and here I see it, VirtualBox. I'll click on that, and it should bring up VirtualBox. Once you open up VirtualBox Manager, it's going to look something like this. You'll click on New, and then it's going to ask you the name and the operating system. So we'll call this My Spark, or whatever you really want to call it, doesn't matter. And then the type, we're going to say Linux, and we'll say Ubuntu 64-bit. Now, if you're running an older computer, you may have to choose 32-bit, and when you're at ubuntu.com, you'll have to look around and download a 32-bit version. So make sure you understand whether your computer's on 64-bit or 32-bit. If it's a relatively newer computer, it's probably on 64-bit, so that's what we're going to be using. And then we'll hit Next. And then you have to choose the memory size. So this step kind of depends on your computer's amount of RAM, but you'll want to give access to a reasonable amount of RAM here for you to operate the Ubuntu virtualization without any trouble. And depending on your applications, I would suggest choosing somewhere between 4 to 8 gigabytes. If you only have 8 gigabytes total on your computer, then just give VirtualBox access to about half of it, 4 gigabytes, which is 4,000 megabytes. So we'll kind of do what I would say is a good amount, like 4 megabytes or half the RAM. I believe so this is the max on my computer. But I would suggest if you have 8 gigabytes, give it 4,000 megabytes. So hit Next. And then there's the hard disk. So you can choose Create Virtual Hard Disk and the default 8 gigabytes. So we'll say create a virtual hard disk now, and the default is 8 gigabytes. Click create, and it says hard disk file type. You're going to choose VDI, VirtualBox disk image. Click next, and then it's going to say storage on physical hard disk. So we're going to choose a fixed size. Dynamically allocated can slow down your input-output speed a little bit, so that's why we're going to choose a fixed size. And after you choose fixed size, say next, and you want to choose a decent amount of space. I would suggest anywhere between 20 and 50 gigabytes, depending on how often you think you're going to be using the virtual box. But remember that you also have to account for the actual OS itself. So we're going to just give it something like 20 gigabytes, kind of a fair amount. You can see I have plenty of room here, so this will kind of have to be a personal call for you, but make sure it at least has enough gigabytes to hold the entire operating system. So I would say something like 5 or 10 minimum. But I really suggest something like 20 to 50 gigabytes just so you don't have any problems. You'll hit create, and this may take a little while depending if you have a hard drive. If you have a solid state drive, it'll be a lot faster, but I'm going to jump in time. This is going to take me about 2 minutes, so I'll jump forward in time until it's done. All right, once that process is done, it's going to revert back to this screen and you'll see your machine. So you're going to right click on this and then go to settings, or just Control S. And then you're going to go to system and you're going to click on the processor tab. And depending on your computer, you can allow access to the maximum amount of CPUs in the green zone. So you can also exceed that if you want. Really plans on what you're going to do or how heavy you're going to push this. But I usually just push it to the max on the green. And then we want to also go to display, and we want to assign a little bit more video memory so it looks a little nicer. I'm going to give it up to about like halfway of my max, which is like 80 megabytes. And then optionally you can enable 3D acceleration, so I recommend you do that. And then you're going to hit OK. It's going to set up those settings, and then you're going to double click on your virtual machine. And then that might take a little while to set up, but eventually you'll see this pop-up that says select startup disk. And this is where you're going to point it to the ubuntu.iso that you downloaded. So we're going to click over here, and I already have Ubuntu 16.04. So I'll click on that, and then I'm going to click start. And this is going to essentially install Ubuntu onto your virtual machine. Now, this may take a while depending on how you install it or if it's going to run off of this. But we're going to keep running this, and we're going to basically go through the Ubuntu installation process. So you can see here it's starting up Ubuntu based off that ISO file. And then eventually you're going to see something that looks like this. You'll also see these little pop-ups saying it's grabbing your keyboard and mouse action. You can go ahead and close those. And I'm going to expand this just a little bit so you can see more of the screen here. And it's going to say either try Ubuntu or install Ubuntu. So we actually want to install Ubuntu. Again, this is only installing it onto this virtual machine. So we'll click here, install. And then it's going to say download updates while installing Ubuntu. We're going to do that. So select that. As far as third-party software, don't worry about that. We don't need to do it. And we're going to hit continue. And then you get this warning here that says erase disk and install Ubuntu. So that actually is what you want to select. Don't worry, it's not erasing the disk of your actual computer. It's only going to clear the memory that we set aside when installing the VirtualBox virtual machine. So that is already empty memory because you selected it. So feel free to select erase disk and install Ubuntu. Don't worry, it's totally safe. And then you're going to click install now. And it says write the changes to disk. Go ahead and continue. Then eventually it will take you to a time zone asking you where you are. Just select what it said or select your own time zone. Hit continue. And then select your keyboard layout. I'm in English USA, so I'll just continue with that, the defaults. And then it's going to ask who are you, so go ahead and input your name. Computer's name is fine, username, that's fine. And then we can choose a password if you want. I'll say test password. And then let's confirm it. Test password. And then I'm going to say login automatically. Obviously it's a weak password because I said test password, but this is just on my home computer, so it doesn't really matter. Hit continue. And then what it's going to do is go through the installation process. So this is going to take a little bit of time. So we're going to jump forward in the video until this is done. Eventually, you'll see installation complete, and it'll ask you to restart the computer. That's the VirtualBox computer, so you can click on Restart Now, and it will restart this virtual computer. And if this takes too long, sometimes there's an error and the VirtualBox won't allow itself to restart. You can just close this window and then start over again. Just right-click and then restart it from the actual VirtualBox environment. So it's here, it says, please remove the installation medium, then press Enter. So you can go ahead and press Enter there. Then once you press Enter, eventually you'll see it auto log in for you, so you'll kind of see some command line things, and the window will pop up again like this. Now, if for some reason it's staying on black or it's staying on the command line for a really long time, that is something like more than 10 minutes, you can always just come back here to VirtualBox, right-click, and then reset it and then start it up again from here. But right now, we'll just go ahead and close this keyboard shortcut. So click on Search Your Computer, and that will go away. Alright, once you have this actual Ubuntu VirtualBox running and ready to go, the next step is to actually download and install Python, the Jupyter Notebook, as well as Spark. And we're going to continue with that in part 2 of this VirtualBox installation lecture series. So I will see you in the very next lecture, where I'm going to continue right from my Ubuntu desktop. Thanks, I'll see you there.